So being an activist for social change of any kind is a role that requires extreme energy, lots of enthusiasm. It also usually requires a bit of personal sacrifice and maybe a lot of that. So it can be very rewarding, but as in most things in life, double-edged sword, it can also bring the risk of burnout. And burnout is something that I've studied now for many years in various kinds of occupations, usually caregiving ones, people working with other people, healthcare, social services, ministry, criminal justice systems, etc. But a number of years ago, Mary Gomes and I also decided to look at issues with activists. And so what I wanted to do today was just share with you some of what we learned and actually quote the words of some of the activists that we talked to about what some of these issues are, and hopefully get to some of the lessons learned for all of us as we're involved in these kinds of, do I have to go back? Here we go. Starting with giving a clear definition of what burnout is. It gets tossed around a lot, so let me say a little bit more about really what we're talking about. Burnout is a stress response. Stress, exhaustion, really extreme kind of exhaustion. It is your physical stress response. You can't sleep, have difficulty eating, health problems, etc. And this is something that activists told us often in their interviews, that this is a first really big hurdle that they have to deal with. So let me quote, "I'm feeling totally overwhelmed by the immensity of the problem, feeling like I have to do everything, support every struggle, every issue, feeling small and helpless, getting lethargic, not knowing what to do, and ending up doing nothing." So this is a kind of a feeling that people have and struggle with often. Second part of burnout, and for me this is the critical bottom line part of burnout, and this is cynicism. It's usually starting as a reaction to the exhaustion. You cut back, you don't do as much, but it turns into this very negative, hostile, cynical, take this job and shove it mentality. And what it means is that you start, instead of doing your very best, you start shifting to do the bare minimum. And that means that the quality of whatever you're doing isn't really up to your own standards, but to those of other people. So again, let me quote from some of our interviews. "I feel overwhelmed, and sometimes I look at the stuff I have to do and I get angry. Like, why doesn't someone else do this stuff? Why is it just me? And I begin to think that the other people don't have the same dedication that I do." So you're beginning to get negative about your colleagues, people working with you. But it can also, and this is often, sometimes with tragic consequences, towards the republic, the other people that you were serving in some way. So you'll have things about this sort of self-righteous, almost bitterness, towards an unresponsive clientele or public. I find myself thinking, oh, a pox on them. They don't want to help themselves. They don't want to change or get better. So why should I do anything for them? And so this is, again, a very serious consequence of burnout. And the third one is feeling ineffective. It's really a negative response about yourself and beginning to feel like, no matter what I've done, is it worth it? Maybe I haven't really accomplished very much. You feel discouraged. You feel, this is not really good, ineffective. One of the lessons that's clear to know about doing activism is that social change is not linear. It does not make a little bit of progress every day, and you can see it. And activists will talk about highs, lows, going backward, feeling that everything you tried to do hasn't worked out. And so it's really important to recognize that and deal with it, because otherwise it makes you feel like it's me and I'm not doing a good job. Okay, so there's a slide to remember of what I'm talking about today. It's this one, and it's really about the fit between the person and the work. And it's not just about who you are. It's not just about the job you're doing, but in some sense the balance, the fit, the match that's going on. And you can do things to make that better or, find ways in which it gets worse, which we don't want. So there are 6 areas, it turns out, that we have found that predict greater burnout if there is a mismatch or imbalance in these 6 areas. These are also areas to think about, how do I change things so that it works better. Okay, so here are the 6. The first one, and this is the one everybody thinks of first, it's not necessarily the most important, but it turns out for a lot of activists, it's really one of the, I'll say, big 3 of these 6, in that it's workload. You have too much to do, not enough time, not enough resources. It was due yesterday. All of these things are leading to this workload imbalance. And so here's one activist. You keep pushing yourself. There's no limit. It's like an anorexic getting thin. You're never quite thin enough. When you're an activist, you're never working hard enough. So you're exhausted and you feel like you've got nothing left to give. So this is a really kind of dangerous place to get to in terms of activism. So workload is really, we find, a major problem that they report as being an important first step on a path towards burnout. Second area has to do with control, how much discretion or say you have over the job. And again, if there's a good balance, things are working well. If you're feeling micromanaged, out of control, chaos, it can lead to greater risk of burnout. Third area is reward. And this is not just physical rewards like pay or something like that. It turns out social rewards, recognition for what you do is really what's critical here. As you're working so hard, giving so much of yourself, is there somebody who recognizes it and says, wow, that was great, so glad you're here, thank you. And this, again, is an important area. This one, community, is one of the other big 3 for activists. Community means the other people you're working with, working for, supervising, all those kinds of social relationships. And what we find there is that for activists, this is a critical area with regard to either burnout or engagement. There was a survey done a few years ago on activists to list the most important rewards and the most important stressors in their work. Relationships with other activists turned out to be number 1 on both lists. The highest reward, the biggest, most important stressor. So dealing with people when you're not working together as a team, there's incivility, there's bullying, there's lack of respect, there's not trust, support, etc., can make a toxic environment, socially toxic environment that can precipitate burnout. And then the 6th area is values. And this, again, is a really important one for activists because often it is some core values, some key principles that have led them to go into this kind of work. And this is really, really important. And what happens with values is you can get into a situation of value conflicts. Happens in life all the time. But here you are dedicated to this value, and yet you're going to find yourself in situations where you're going to have to compromise, maybe to your mind too much. Like, suppose there's a piece of legislation that would be a step in the right direction but doesn't go far enough. And do you support it? You feel you have to? I mean, this kind of conflict. So if you don't find ways to deal with these kinds of compromises or figuring out how to move forward with these values, this can be the final thing that leads people to say, I'm out of here, I'm quitting. And I think some of the quotes that we got a lot from a number of people were saying they're quitting the movement, saying, I didn't leave it left me. And so this is that kind of value issue that can be a problem. Oops, let's go back. So basically engagement, if we think of that, is kind of the opposite of burnout. It's having not exhaustion, but a lot of energy and enthusiasm, wanting to get deeply involved in the work rather than pulling away from it, and feeling good and effective about what you're doing. So what are some of the lessons that we've learned from people who have managed to deal with burnout, not necessarily never had it, they all sort of had a healthy respect for it, but to managed to keep going in positive ways. And part of the key theme that came out a lot was that people focusing more on the positives than on the negatives. In other words, what is it that we accomplished? Where did we make progress? What is the thing that really gave me some joy and hope about what I'm doing, rather than being brought down by all the negatives that didn't work out in some way. Reframing what you're doing so that you can still be inspired by it. And I want to quote from a writer, Rebecca Solnit, who's written a great book, Hope in the Dark. Recent strains of activism proceed on the realization that victory is not some absolute state far away, but the achieving of it, not the moon landing, but the flight. The term politics of prefiguration has long been used to describe the idea that if you embody what you aspire to, you have already succeeded. That is to say, if your activism is already democratic or peaceful or creative, that in one small corner of the world, these things have triumphed. So again, people are really sort of focusing on these kind of things. Finding a balance between your personal life and your activist goals. You need a life beyond that work to sustain yourself. And finding time for the things that replenish you, give you rest, give you joy, friends, family, activities, hobbies, etc. Finding that balance. And again, let me quote from another activist. This is a long time one. I relaxed a lot more. When I was younger, I was convinced that I needed to drive myself every single minute. The planet wouldn't stay in its orbit if I wasn't pushing it. Now, I feel that I can go to the sauna. And I'll still hate imperialism in an hour and a half. And the delusion of grandeur, that it all rests on my shoulders, is more responsibility than anyone can accept. Both these things have changed in the last 10 years, and that's helped me stay an activist. So burnout is a signal of imbalance, of too many negatives outweighing the positives, and it's a warning sign to make some changes in how you live your life, both in the activist realm and at home. And as another former activist said it to me, don't forget to live. You've got to do that and be responsible. Don't throw yourself into the fire and be consumed. Thank you.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.